But one thing that is unanimous about all of us is you all still have the responsibility of your own self, right? Again, it's not a fair playing field and all those things. It's harder for some people. All that is true, but my opinion was always like, I just want to be in charge of my destiny. And if I don't work hard enough and I fail, that's on me.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefendorfer, founder and CEO of Mountain Tough, and we are so glad that you are here. We love seeing you come back to these episodes week after week to learn tools for your toolbox to live that abundant, virtuous life. It is our goal each week to bring you inspiring guests, some of the best of the best in the world, to unpack how they train physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally so that you can take those skills and apply them to your life. Thanks for being here, and thanks for making us one of the top mental toughness shows in the country. If you are a new listener or a loyal listener, and you have a second, if you could leave us a ranking or review of this show on the podcast store of your choice, those do mean the world to us, and they do allow these episodes to get out to more people to transform more lives. Transitioning to Mountain Tough and current events at Mountain Tough right now, I want to make sure you have a chance to sign up for Tough Fest 2024. Tough Fest is our global gathering of Mountain Toughers here at the lab in Bozeman, Montana. It is in June, and you want to make sure you register and attend that event if you can. It is a day of impact. It is a day that will change and kickstart your life and change the trajectory of your next 10 or 15 years. Last year was our first year, and it is an insane experience to have like-minded people gathering for a day like that. Iron sharpens iron, and the impact that comes out of Tough Fest is phenomenal for sure. What you're going to see is outdoor workouts, indoor workouts, guest speakers. We're going to do a Conquer Hunger food drive, and then some film premieres as well. But you'll be able to connect all day long with like-minded individuals that are pursuing their mission and purpose in life and living that always ready lifestyle. So make sure you register if you haven't yet. Tickets are going fast. Transitioning now to today's guest. Today's guest is Andy Galpin. Many of you have probably heard Andy on the Huberman Lab. He is a reoccurring guest there. His episodes on that show are phenomenal as he breaks down the science of physical and mental human performance. Andy is a professor, a full tenured professor of kinesiology at California State University, Fullerton, and he created a Center for Sport Performance and the founder and director of the Biochemistry and Molecular Exercise Physiology Lab. He created that lab about 13 years ago with the mission to find out what top performers can do to up the game physically and mentally, nutritionally, but is a huge part of his mission is getting that information out to the world. A phenomenal episode today. Andy and I are going to break down mental training and how that can change the game for hunters, athletes, military members. And then we're going to dive into some specifics on hybrid athlete training, as well as nutrition, blood work, and supplementation. This is an episode that will leave you with countless tips, tricks, and nutrition advice and supplements you can apply to your life tomorrow to be a better human, a better athlete, to pursue your mission in life. So stand by for my conversation with Andy Galpin. Let's start with where you're at now and what that research lab looks like and what specifically you're doing there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my daytime job, I'm a full professor and a scientist at Cal State Fullerton. So within that, I have a center called the Center for Sport Performance. So we've got a bunch of laboratories that all study anything that we think can enhance human performance. And so this could range. We have a saying here that it's muscle to gene and everything in between, which is, we take muscle biopsies and we look at genetic, molecular, and cellular markers to identify why some people are growing muscle faster or improving strength faster than others or things like that, all the way to whole muscle performance, like which style of deadlifting gets people stronger faster. Yoga stuff, putting an ice pack on your neck in between rounds of a UFC fight, does that actually help? The breath
Hmm.
work stuff. So like really it is anything that I feel like can contribute potentially to enhancing human performance. Like I have an interest in it. And so day-to-day wise, that's what our center is doing. On the side of that, we work with a lot of athletes, and we work with a number of professional athletes as well as what I'll call athletes, but are non-professional athletes. So like folks like you guys, right? Like that just
Yep.
they're not an athlete per se, but they're clearly trying to maximize their physical performance. So the pro athletes we work with men, women, we work with younger, older. When I say pro athletes, I'm generally referring here to the elite ones,
Hmm.
meaning we have NFL quarterbacks, all pros, Hall of Famers, MVPs, Cy Young winners, major winners on the PGA Tour, Olympic gold medalists, and UFC champions. Like that's the typical athlete that we work with, and then those other folks that are trying to perform at their best as well. So it is part of my job is what is the science of human performance, and then the other part of my job is how does this look, in the application of there. So
Hmm.
we learn stuff scientifically that we apply in our practice, and we learn a lot of stuff in our practice that we then come back and try to understand the science behind. So it's a little bit of both, and but functionally, my world is to try to help people look, feel, and perform better. And they get to decide
Man.
what look means. They get to decide what perform means, and they get to decide what feel means. And then we just try to help them have more advanced tools and understandings to get to that goal as fast as possible.
That's a cool job, man. That's amazing.
It's pretty incredible, man. Like every day
Yeah.
is pretty awesome in my life.
What did your journey look like leading you there? How did you get to that spot?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a country kid. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. That's why, like I told, we were talking before, man. I love hunting. I love outdoor stuff. I know it's kind of like popular now, which is great, but I don't know anything different. Like that,
Yeah.
that's my life. It's like it's the weirdest thing to watch something that, was a weird thing to do, I guess. But
Yeah.
it was my childhood. Like it's just every kid I grew up with. Like I don't know any different, right? So I come from a small town. Like my dad was a construction worker. Like it just, it was a normal kind of a logging town background there. So we did all the normal stuff as kids that you do in the country. Was fortunate enough to be pretty good at sports in high school, so I went on to play college football at a small school in Western Oregon. Got my degree in exercise science there, and then was able to work my way up the ladder. Which I could expand the story if you want, or I'll do the short version now. But I went on to get a master's degree in human movement sciences. I started working with professional athletes at that point.
Hmm.
Then went back, got a PhD in human bioenergetics, and then started my lab out here in 2011. So
Awesome.
that's the quick version of kind of like the academic
Yeah.
journey, if you will, how I got here specifically.
Wow. So you've been running that lab for a decade, a little longer than a decade.
Yeah, like 13 years or so.
And what is the pathway for everything you're learning at the lab to get out into the world and society? Is there a pathway for that? Like all the information that you guys are learning to get out to normal people?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. One of the parts I skipped when you asked earlier is the mission of my entire center. It's to produce and disseminate all that
Awesome.
research, right? And so when I came into my job, when I interviewed, and I specifically said, "Hey, look, this is what I want to do. I want to do the research, and then I want to disseminate it." And I literally said in like my letter, I'm like, I want one to one for every paper. And the amount of time I spend on one paper, I want to spend that much time on dissemination, which is
Mm.
getting it out to the people. And the reason is, if you look at a typical academic paper, you're going to have something on average of 6 to 8 people will actually read that paper, which means your work is doing nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at all unless you put equal amount of energy of getting it to the world. And so
Hmm.
if you look at what I've done over my career, it's not only, okay, so step one is let's take the stuff from the lab and let's do it in real athletes. That's how you get it out there, right? Because people want to know what the most famous drummer in the world is doing for his preparation on tour. People want to know what um, these Masters winner golfers are doing. People want to know what the highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL is like. Okay, great. So like that's step number one. And then step number
Yeah.
two is what I've done over my entire career and what we're doing right now, which is public communication, right? My stuff is up on YouTube and my social media. It is all science communication. And almost all of it is 100% free. And is one of the reasons why I've done so much public outreach over the years. It is exactly that. So like to me, that is the answer is continuing to make science accessible and as many platforms as possible. And I hope we've done a good job of that over the last 10 years.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a lot of phenomenal information sitting on hard drives or sitting in documents that just can't be used.
Yeah, I mean, people, even if you try to, it's just really hard and there's lots of nuance behind that. And for a long time, there was this kind of attitude in academia. And I just remember coming up as a student being like, that's just wrong. Like, it shouldn't be that way. And granted, many scientists are not effective communicators and we all have different personal skills. So that's fine. Like, do it there. We don't all have
Hmm.
to do this, but the ones that are good at it, like, there's a huge advantage to that. And the other way to think about it was, man, I spent many years in that lab and many sleepless nights and all that stuff. And then you do all that work and you realize, like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not making any difference in the world at all. And then you get like
Yeah.
a little bit older and you have this like, existential crisis a little bit, and you're like, why am I doing this with my life? Like I get one ride here as best as we know. And
Yeah.
like, why am I doing all this? Like, why when I could be doing all these other things, like, never taking vacations, never taking week, like, what am I doing all this for if literally nothing matters? But like you hit another progress marker to get another thing, to get another small, like very small salary boost. I'm like, why? Like, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. With
so
no
that
second
changed a lot of my
chances.
career. That happened to being like, okay, I'm not doing it that way anymore.
It's so cool too that you were able to build your own lab and build your own center with its own mission behind it. I mean, that's a rare opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I got lucky coming in. They wanted to do something that was like, hey, we would love someone that can do like the molecular side of human performance, but also knows human performance. And that was literally, I came from a sport background. I was training and working with professional athletes, high level ones, again, Major League Baseball players, top draft picks in the NFL, things like that. And then I got a PhD in like molecular physiology. So like, oh my God, like this is exactly what we're looking for. But what people don't really realize is I did that on purpose.
Hmm.
That was 100% intentional. I came out of my undergraduate and like my background a little bit. Like I didn't know what a PhD was. Like I don't know. People in my family aren't scientists and lawyers. Like I didn't know what that was. Like I didn't have this like mentor. I wasn't around. So I was just like, I'm gonna go to school because my dad was like, I don't care what you do in your life, but you're not doing what I did and you know
Yeah.
the
Do
rest of us
something
did and all
different.
that stuff, right? So you're going to school, whatever that means. Okay, so go to school, play football, go to school. And then from there, it was like, you finish school. Now what? I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm going to go work with these athletes. Okay, great. I did that for a few weeks and was like, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. Like I hated it. Like, as a proper strength conditioning coach all day, full day.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I'm like, man, I got to do something different. I don't know what to do, but like, I'm poor. I've been poor. I'll just stay poor. So like, I'll go back to school. Like, I don't care. I don't have
Yeah.
any, it doesn't matter, right? Getting a master's degree is only going to help the situation. So I'm like, let's just get a master's. And then at that point, I realized I'm like, man, I felt like I had a pretty good handle of the human performance thing. And a lot of people were jockeying for positions, right? And this was like everybody wanted to be, especially at the time, 2004. Everybody wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach. Everyone
Yep.
wanted to be at the Division I school, and I was like, oh, I don't really want to do that, and I'm going an uphill battle. And I look over and I'm like, I also want to know like why muscle is doing what it's doing and performance. And I look at the people that know that side of human performance, and none of them know anything about sports. They don't know
Mm-hmm.
anything about strength and conditioning. They don't know anything about this high performance stuff. They're long distance cyclists and swimmers and runners, like at
Yep.
most. And they know nothing about nutrition. They don't have any of these things. So I'm like, man, what if I can go over there, get that scientific skill set from them, and then do it in the population I want to do? Nobody's doing that. So that's
Blue
exactly
ocean.
what I did. My PhD work was not on stuff I was interested in at all, like aging and stuff like I didn't care. But I'm like, man, they have the school, the skill sets and the tools. And if I come back and put that into the stuff that I care about, then I'll be different. And so right as I was finishing, then people started looking for, God, we wish we could have someone that could do A and B. And I'm like, yo,
I'm the
I'm
guy.
the man. And like there wasn't even really an application because they're like, dude, like, you're literally.
The only one.
So I came in and I pretty much got to do this. And that's why I was like, hey, I'm coming in, but here are the ground rules. I'm doing this one-to-one thing. And the guy that was before me, Lee Brown, who's he's like the national scientist of the year in our field, is like, lifetime achievement award winner. So legend in the field was like had already started the center, and he's just like sport performance is our thing, and this is the kind of guy I want. So he brought me in, and then he retired, pretty recently after that, and I was able to kind of run my ship after that. And
Man.
so I got lucky in the sense that he'd already done a lot of the groundwork. And then, my school at the time was pretty much like they didn't force me to do obesity research or public health, which is cool, but just like not my interest.
Yep.
And they kind of let me do what I wanted to do. So I was fortunate on one hand, but also this is what I built. Like I came in to do this, told them I was
That's
going to do it,
incredible.
and then I did it.
Yeah, it's incredible too. Like taking the path less traveled, looking for the opposite of what everyone else is doing, looking for that blue ocean instead of that red ocean, and seeing it pay off is huge.
Yeah, man. Like there's a classic academic like kind of route you take in your career. And I just remember so early on being like, I can do that. And you're gonna be another salmon swimming upstream.
Hmm.
You live, you
Yep.
die, nobody cares. Doesn't matter, right? I'm like, or like I can go that way. And I remember telling my dean and stuff when I came in that exactly. I'm like, look, I can do the normal thing. I can do the federal funding and blah blah blah. And nobody survives that journey. A
Yeah.
couple of people at the end. I'm like, or I can go this way. And I'm not fighting against anybody. Like there's nothing there. I got to carve my own path. That's the challenge. But like I'm gonna get there if I'm good and talented. Where the other route is like if you're good and talented, that's not determines your success there. Because there's it's other stuff. It's you have to have the right mentor. You have to have the right like blah 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 to get there. I'm like
Connections.
here, there's nobody in my way. There's it's an uncut path. I got to make a stream out of dirt. But I like that because now it comes down to like, are you willing to put in the work and do you have the talent? And to me, like that was the barrier I wanted to fight, not just like you're working and you have the talent, but you didn't know the right person. I'm like, I'm not playing
Hmm.
that one.
Yeah.
I want control of my journey here. And so like that's when I played and it worked out wildly successful. I mean, I have a lot of people that kind of like in our academic circles that have always asked me like, how the hell did you do this? And I'm always like, I had the guts at the beginning
Yeah.
to be like, I'm running this way, and you guys
Yeah.
didn't. So like, this is not like a last 5 year thing or 3 year thing. Like this thing started 15 years ago or more
No
when I
one
had that
knows.
vision. So I took the risk then, and I burned bridges at the time of people because they're like, that's not how you do it, and that's not. I'm like, okay, fine. So I ran that risk. You just didn't see it.
It's so cool. It's so cool hearing it now too, because obviously to me, hearing your story, it's connected to your outdoor childhood too, like your outdoor upbringing, being a hunter, adventure, taking risks, taking the path less traveled. And if you would have had the academic upbringing from like a Ivy League family, you probably would have had a completely different decision making process. But because of your outdoorsy childhood, you were more prone to take those risks versus other people?
I mean, I think that like there's a couple of things I can go back to that. One, the desire for autonomy, right? Like everybody that's at least, I'm not going to speak to anybody else, but just the community I grew up in, like personal responsibility was a huge thing. And like everyone has bad draws and all that stuff, and that happens. And we're not all on the same playing background. All that's true. But one thing that is unanimous about all of us is you all still have the responsibility of your own self, right? Again, it's not a fair playing field and all those things. It's harder for some people. All that is true, but my opinion was always like, I just want to be in charge of my destiny. And if I don't work hard enough and I fail, that's on me. And if I don't have the skill, like all those things that I said earlier, I just didn't want those things to be in somebody else's control. And I think it's because of exactly what you said, right? That those were core values from that entire community. The second thing would be not necessarily like adventure per se. Doesn't come to my mind as the top there, but more of being like, look, there is your peril is on you. And so it's like, hey, like there's a certainty with this life. And don't lose sight of that, right? Like when you're in the country, you're around death a lot.
Yep.
And it's like, that this right, and that you're confronted with that a ton, and you're doing it oftentimes in many areas. And so I think that finality of realization of like being like, hey, this thing can go bad in a hurry, and you better make sure that you're thinking about that enough to make sure that you're doing the things with your life and the shot that you get that matters. So all that I think drove a lot of me. And then the last one would be like, man, like the kids that I grew up with, the mentors that I grew up with, my family. Boy, you're not gonna get a lot of sympathy for not working hard. Like that's just not gonna be in the cards.
Yeah.
And so like we prided ourselves on like it's okay to lose if somebody's better than you. Like that happens, right? But like you're never gonna be outworked. Like it is style over substance, or substance over style. It is like we're gonna be the first and last out. And you still might lose, but all that was just like how I grew up. And so we look down on people who are kind of lazy, right? So I was always like, I looked at everybody else in our field and I would just like basically size them up because I'm like, there's no way you can work as hard as I can. I know you can't. Like, I know you can't. So I would always get really excited about that because I'm like, you think we're going to go after the same thing? You're not going to beat me here. I don't care what your background is because you're not going to be willing to do A, B, and C. So all those things I think contributed 100% to me looking at this and going, you guys have done this way. Where I'm from, like we problem solve in a different way. And like, I think I can beat you all there.
It's incredible. Yeah. It's incredible how, life can carve us and mold us into these specific roles that we're supposed to be in. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up, and that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My Mountain Tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the Enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel, and then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on MountainOps.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to MountainOps.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH, all caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. Let's fast forward into the lab now, like in 2024. What would it look like if we walked in there? What's going on? What kind of tests are being ran? And then I'm really curious as well as around, in addition to all the physical human performance testing and research, is there also a mental component?
Yeah, so within our center, we have, my laboratory, the molecular physiology lab. We've got a human performance lab. This is more, think of force plates. So, how much force can you put into the ground, and, how can you move, things like that. We have a classic exercise physiology lab, which is, metabolic stuff, right? So VO2 max, carts, body composition, stuff like that. And then within that, we also had, I think, one of the most robust and successful sports psychology labs. So we had at one point 3 faculty members. Now we are down to 0, but we had for many years 3 who were going to the Olympic Games every year. They were scientists and they were publishing with PhDs, but they were working so much in the field. And the reason I say 0 is because they have actually all left. One of them now works for the Philadelphia Phillies in Major League Baseball. Another works for Cal Berkeley. So he's up there. And then another one left. It was with USA volleyball and a handful of other swimming and stuff like that for a while. So I can't speak to sports psychology like much, but was a huge component. What I can tell you is every one of our pro athletes that came in for me, for any of our metabolic or strength conditioning and performance stuff, I always was like, you should also, you really need to go talk to one of these people. And so we would try to get, and we were pretty successful. We had a pretty good percentage of them who would also then hire one of our sports psychologists, even, if they didn't have, therapy or mental health issues. It's like that's a different thing. What we're talking about is high performance, just like you're trying to maximize your metabolic performance. You need to maximize your mental performance as well. So that was, and is a big component. I can also tell you of all of our clients that are in any of our coaching programs that we're working with daily. We have this big, really, really comprehensive, high ticket coaching program that we do. All of them in there, work with our mental side as well. That is a standard part of it. So yeah, that's a big portion of it. So I can kind of answer that one. And then we can go backwards and talk more detail about any of the other kind of stuff there.
That's helpful. Yeah, I was curious because just from my perspective, that mental side is almost as critical as the physical side, and that mind-body connection, and especially performing well and training well, your mental state is critical. And then at the event itself, whatever event you're training for, then that mental state becomes hypercritical, and those skills of down regulating and getting focused is so critical to making sure that all your training pays off. So I was curious how you were coupling those two together.
Yeah, because it's such I always joke that psychology is just misunderstood physiology. It's just we always rib the psychologists about that, right? It's that's not a real field, right? But of course, as I said a second ago, that is how serious we take it as well. It's just not my personal expertise, but you're 100% right. I have seen a lot of high world-class performers ruin every aspect of our nutrition and our supplementation. I mean, think about it this way. So all of our people go through a very long process that we call decode. What's that mean? It typically takes somewhere between 30 and 60 days. And we're running a comprehensive physiological analysis that is everything from hundreds of blood markers, stool, urine, saliva. We're running very advanced sleep assessment. We're scanning their entire bedroom. We're running cognitive marker testing on them. We're testing their teeth, their muscle, their respiration. We're going after brain waves. All that's being done. We're testing physical performance in a number of ways. We're running full imaging analysis. We actually get a full three-dimensional image with a company called Springbok. We can actually run them through and we can get a three-dimensional picture of each individual muscle in your entire body. So we have that full analysis. We're getting full movement analysis screened by Charlie Weingroff, one of the most famous physical therapists in world history, going through how do you move. We're taking them through an in-depth nutritional analysis. Everything that you're eating and drinking, when, where it's coming from, what are you putting on your body, what type of deodorant are you using, where are you getting your toothpaste from? Like all this stuff is being done in addition to more and more stuff. We're getting advanced analytics of a ton of things on them, right? They go through this entire process. We know exactly what's going on in their body. We know what's going on their body. We know what's going in their body. We know how it's being processed, and we know the outcomes. Okay, like we're testing your sweat, we're testing your hair. Like all this is being done, right? All that is then formulated into a plan. It is crafted everything from hyper-specific supplementation based on your unique physiology, nutrition down to the micronutrient, your exercise programming, your recovery, what time you wake up during the day, what kind of water you're drinking, what are you using sauna? So what kind or not, or like what are we doing breath work wise? All this is being done and put into a comprehensive system that you're coached, you're being measured along the way, seeing how your body is responding, adapted. Like this is our full immersion coaching program, right? This is very expensive.
Yeah.
All that though, you can come all the way down to the very end. And in the 10 seconds before your fight or your game or your match, you can blow all that fucking shit if your mind goes wrong.
Yeah. It's
all that can be wasted if you shit the bed mentally, like right before your competition. And so that's part of the reason why, like, no matter how many times we've done this, it's terrifying until they get in the ring and compete and do the thing, whether it's going to be even our non-athletes, right? We've had plenty of people that are done things like Race Across America or an Ironman or a 5K for that matter. Like we got people at all levels, right? I don't want to make it sound like we only deal with these crazy extreme people. And it's terrifying until like they run that race, because you just never know, because things like that, it's like, the system will work, right? And there's just no questions left. We've analyzed everything. We know how their body's responding. We can predict actually. There's one of these technology that we use called Spexa. They're actually able to, this is pretty dope. They're able to hand they did this at the Chicago Marathon. They did this at a couple of other events in Sweden, where they were able to hand the coach for like a marathon and like swimming events a note card 6 weeks before the competition, and it told them exactly what time all their athletes were going to run in their race. They go compete. Coach looks at that and they're within like 0.5% accuracy 6 weeks before. So we know what's going to happen. Like I know within a half mile per hour what my pitchers are going to throw that night in Major League Baseball. Like we know. But all that goes off if they don't do the right thing mentally or freak out or like something bad can happen. So yeah, we try to use that as like hey, as much attention as we're putting into, we're going over hundreds of biological markers of you. We want to put that same kind of energy and effort into your mental performance as well, just to make sure, because the same thing, like while you can also tank the bed mentally, you can also outperform your physiology if your mental game is appropriate. And we see a lot of our athletes will do that. Like we call that out kicking your coverage. It's like, man, your physiology was okay, your athleticism was okay, but you just seem to outperform. Like Brian Ortega, one of the UFC fighters I coach, he is that way. Like he's not always like if you see some of his performance markers and stuff, people would be like, that's not super elite. But then when you watch him perform, you're like, man, the guy has magic and chaos, and his ability to perform is out of this world. And so he outkicks his coverage constantly. Like that's pretty much what he does.
Awesome.
To the point where like you can almost bank on it preparation wise. And some of the opposite. Some we know we're gonna like fall a little bit at the moment or just be there. So yeah, it is all a component, but that's why we love sports, because they're unpredictable, right?
Yeah. It's so cool. I mean, those days where you outkick your coverage are the best days. It's like the best feeling you've ever had when mentally something happens in an event and you just crush that event, kind of unexpected, because your mindset was just perfect for some reason. I mean, it's like the most thrilling feeling ever.
Yeah, there's a little bit of what's called in the sports psychology world. It's an old thing. It goes all the way back to the like one of the more famous sports psychologists, Csikszentmihalyi is his name. But it's like an inverted U of arousal. And so if you can imagine at the bottom, you have this issue of saying, okay, if the task feels too easy, like if I asked you to go out right now and set up a target and pull your rifle out and set it up at 25 yards, right? Like you would see no change in your heart rate, your mental focus, no physiological or psychological perceptions would change because you're like, there's no challenge there, right? You would actually honestly be bored.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is stupid. Okay, if I did the opposite and I put it at 2,500 yards, you'd be like, well, like I can't hit that. Like there's no chance. And so it's the carrot's too far because you're like, there's just no ability. The inverted U says, where is the sweet spot in the middle, right? So what if we put it at 500 yards, but then we shrink the target? Okay, great. Now what if we add some sort of punishment or some sort of reward? And now what if we do it like with 4 of your friends and there's $100 on the line?
Yeah.
Like, or like, and so now what ends up happening is like the challenge maybe we'll put it at 150 and we'll just say who can shoot the closest group, whatever the case is, right? And loser buys lunch for everybody. Like, doesn't matter that it's a lot of money on the line. It's just like the
thrill.
That's what makes you go and zoom in, right? So when you come across these things that happen, whether it's in life, like say something happens in your business and you realize, and you get off this podcast and you realize, oh my God, you're getting audited by the IRS and they have found that your business partner has just embezzled 300 grand from you and you'll never be able to get it back. And oh my God, like, okay, you're going to go into panic mode. You're going to go, because that challenge is enormous, but so much is on the line. You will have no option for the most part to make one of two choices. One of them is collapse. Probably the other one is like, you will figure out a new level of performance. That's kind of what you're referring to, right? Is like, something bad happens, something breaks in the backwoods, something happens, and you're like, you have no real options here. And that becomes so invigorating and so addicted to people, because what you're addicted to is actually that feeling of hyper focus.
Yep.
You can get there. Now you can get there in a lot of different things. It's just that panic and extreme things tend to, when something real is on the line, they tend to make those feelings. The goal of sports psychology is like, can we get closer to that without the danger?
Yeah.
Right? That's how you perform at your best day to day, is when you can get that feeling without something truly traumatic or actually truly dangerous on the line. And that's what those folks are able to help people get closer to. Your body will always know the difference between something like really being dangerous and not. So it's not about getting all the way there, but it's about getting like somewhat closer.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes, and so we paired two together in the lab, and that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added to your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. It's pretty wild how missed it is in the world of focusing on their mental state, mental fitness, and just mind state for the event. We see it from normal, everyday, awesome human beings all the way up to like the best of the best in the world in the military. We see it at every single level that a lot of people, because of their physical abilities, don't think, focus, or train any of the mindset work at all, even at the top of the top in some of these elite organizations. And in the hunting world, it's very, very, very common for someone to train with their bow or their rifle all year, all summer, and not once train that skill under any sort of stress. And so then even if they're training physically very well and they're shooting all summer, they will, show up on that hunt and they'll still panic under that stress and pressure of like a screaming bull coming into them 40 yards with their bow. If they have done no like stress inoculation training at all, you'll see them crumble. And it's pretty devastating actually, because like they spent a whole year training for that one moment to count. But even at like the top of the top, it's not trained as much as I thought it was going to be, that mindset.
Yeah, we do things like that as often as we can, and this is actually, again, something I've learned from my sports psychology colleagues, is what you'll never feel the same, right? There will be nothing like that bull in front of you. Especially, and like the thing about hunting that's the best is it's different than sport, because in sport, I know the date is coming. I know the chance is coming. I know I'm gonna get to go in the cage. I'm gonna get to do the thing. And hunting, like you might prepare the whole year, and you might go on the hunt, and then you just may never find a bull, let alone have one there. So like, when those things happen, it's like, oh my gosh. And then when you blow it like that, it's more devastating, because that's it. Like, your hunt is over. You got to wait again the next year. So one of the things that we do is we try to put our folks into a similar-ish environment. And so what does that mean? Like, for example, with Brian Ortega, I'll go back to actually, just because when I worked with him, he was an undefeated UFC fighter. He had fought all the way to the championship, fought a world title fight, lost that fight, came back and needed to rebuild kind of everything. So we had a couple of years actually from his world title fight to his next fight. And so by the time we got into that fight, it was COVID, and we had to actually go to Abu Dhabi and fight in Fight Island.
I remember that.
And he had to fight against a guy named Korean Zombie, who could have been fighting for the title then, and this was a title eliminator fight. So they were putting him in there for Zombie to win, so Zombie could then go fight for a title. And just by the name, like, this guy's nickname is the Korean Zombie. He's terrifying. Yeah. He's just totally terrifying guy who just won't go away. So Brian had fired his entire team, basically. We have a competition coming up. He hasn't fought in a couple of years. We got to go halfway across the world in this situation. We don't know half of what's going on. We got to fight a guy who's a zombie, literally, who basically they're teaming him up so this guy can win and go fight for a title. An entirely new team. He doesn't know how any of us are going to respond. He hasn't ever worked with the entire team except for Henner Gracie. Henner is his mentor since he was a kid. We leave California, we go to Vegas, we quarantine there, then we go to Abu Dhabi. In Vegas, we find out Henner flagged for COVID. So Henner has to go back home. So now we go on that plane, and Brian has literally never, ever, ever been to a single fight with any person on his entire team. Not me, his wrestling coach, his boxing coach, his striking coach. No one there he's ever been to a fight with, right? And none of us have ever coached with each other. So he had kind of assembled this like Voltron sort of team.
Yep.
I didn't know anybody else in the team. No one else knew anybody. Like, it's entirely, and he's just like, holy shit. And all these other factors going in, right? Now he has a couple of choices in which he can go mentally on that. And of course, there is still a large part of him just being like, this is awful. Like, it's not zero. But he, as I showed you, I said earlier, like he has a mental place to go to with that chaos where he like
Yeah.
settles in pretty well. Okay. To mitigate that, before we left, we started making his main sparring session on Friday nights. Instead of, 3 o'clock in the afternoon or even like 11 o'clock in the morning when we traditionally train, we started going, okay, great. Fridays, you're going to wake up. You're not going to train. We're going to do basically a fight simulation all Friday, exactly like
Mm.
you're going to do it in the fight. We're going to get to the arena the same time you get there. We're going to have the same warm up we're going to do on our fight. We're going to play your walkout music. We're shutting the whole gym down. Like no one else is in there. No, background music. No people walking around with kids jujitsu class. Like this thing is there, right? We're doing 1 minute. We're doing fight simulation stuff. Not as hard, not full sparring, but just to go through the timing, the pace. We
Yeah.
literally did fight simulations, right? Where like he would either be against nobody or against a dummy sparring partner, basically. And we're calling out scenarios. Oh, you just got rocked. He's on top of you. What are we doing? Like we took the music up super, super loud. Like we did all these things. It's not the same as being in a UFC fight, but we tried to like get closer to that environment. We did his pre-workout routine. We did his breath work in between rounds, in the round, right? His coaches are screaming chaotically. We're doing things unorganized on purpose, right? Like we told him we were going to do A and B, and then we actually did C and D. And in the middle of his sparring,
Mix
he's
it
like, no,
up.
no, and to try to fluster him a little bit, right? So we started doing that. When we get to Vegas, on the plane, and Hannah is out of there. Okay, great. We didn't have like we're quarantined for 48 hours in our hotel room. We don't have a training center or whatever, right? And he's like, you can't does not work out for 48 hours. So we're pushing beds against the wall. He's laying on his back, and we tape his mouth shut. He closes his eyes, and we do a full five because we had a 5 round fight. We do a
Yeah.
full 5 round fight mentally, right? We do the whole thing mentally. I'm manipulating his breath work to get his heart rate up, but he's not physically moving at all, right? We're doing breath work holds. His coaches are going through scenarios, boom, boom, boom. Hey, shoot to this, double jab, you get back up, set this up, like all this stuff going on. Defend the takedown, get back up, and you're on the wall. And he's like rehearsing these things mentally, right? To go through everything.
Jeez.
We get all the way, we did this a ton, right? Then we get to Abu Dhabi, we have to quarantine for another like 72 hours in our room. Like we're doing all this kind of stuff, right? And we're running through all these things. We get to the fight, and there's all kinds of chaos the week of the fight, like basically because of time zone change. So they're making him do media like all throughout like the wrong times, right? And he's like, the guy does not sleep for the week because we can't get 8 straight hours without something we have to go do. Whether we got to get a COVID test done, or we got a media, or we got to do an appearance, like we're all kinds of screwed up. The fight ends up taking place like 6:30 in the morning, I think. Because it's like they got to put it on California. Like it was just mayhem everywhere.
Yeah.
He is just like boom. So we did the best we could mentally there. The arena is shut down, right? It's just the fighters, fight staff, and whatever. He goes in, wins the fight in dominating fashion, wins every single round, like ends up getting a title fight directly because of that fight. He walked right out of the cage, walked right up to me, and the first thing he said was like, because one of the mantras I had used to him in the fight was, "If you can breathe, you can fight." Right? Which is like control your breath, control your breath, control your breath, right? We had different breath work sequences he could go to when he got really tired. He had a different one that he could go to after a big burst. He had a different one he could go to in between rounds. And I was very concerned about his conditioning. For multiple reasons. He's fit and trains all that stuff, but there are things going on. Oh, like he had gotten in one of our fight simulations in the hotel room, like literally walking through in jeans, like kind of stuff. He had kind of bent down with one of our coaches, and the coach went like this and jammed his thumb into Brian's eye. So like his eye, like we had all kinds of issues, right? And his eye was all messed up. And so I was just concerned, like, hey, just as long as we can breathe, you can beat this guy. If you can stay in the fight, like we can beat this guy. Brian is exceptional at submissions, exceptional at finishing fights. And this is his true talent. So I'm like, if you've lost all 4.5 rounds, if you're still got 30 seconds left, because he's done this in fights, he's done this in UFC fights. He's lost the whole fight and submitted a guy with a minute left. So I'm like, if you can breathe and we can stay in the fight, you can fight. So he walks right out of the cage. First thing he says to me is like, if I can breathe, I can fight. And I'm like, fantastic. So that rehearsal thing, it made a huge impact on him in the fight. It's not to say like that's the reason he won, of course. It's every coach with all their contribution. My point is like that stuff can help, and you can mitigate those things. I really do believe if we had not practiced any of that stuff, Brian still would have won.
Hmm.
but it helped. It helped a
Yeah.
ton, and it was clear to him right after the fight. And it's been 4 years, and he still was like, man, that stuff was super helpful because it'd been so long. He was out of rhythm, new team, and there's just a lot of factors. And so we tried to bring as many of those factors down as we possibly could. All that to say, kind of the lesson that we learned from that, and one thing that we use consistently. And I've had other actually, I was with John Rahm, one of the golfers that I coach pretty recently, and like one of the things that he talks about, like when it comes to like our training decisions, what we're going to do and stuff, like his philosophy, he's close with Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
He's like, we want to control what we can control, which is to say, like in the sport of fighting, we can't control many things: the eye poke, the time zones,
Mm.
the like the opponent. Here's what we could control: we can control your walkout music. I can control what you do, and so like in between rounds with how you're breathing. And so we anything that we have an actual ability to control, we're going to make
Control it.
sure we are excellent at that. With like Phelps, he would always like he would talk about like if you're a basketball player, you can control free throws. So just make sure you're good at free throws.
Mm.
100%. So like really double down the things you can control. Make sure you are on them 100%. In golf, it's different. Like there are things you can control and things you can't, and just make sure you are making sure you are good at the things you can control. And then we're gonna work on other stuff too, of course. But like, don't let the free passes, don't let the free wins become losses.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating because it's the same with backcountry hunting where you're not going to be able to control the weather. You're not going to be able to control the snowstorm, but you can control, like your fitness level of showing up. You can't control your gear preparation, your stress training. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean your rest, like all those things can be controlled prior to going into it. So yeah, it's a good lesson there.
That's amazing. I do want to transition here, and I want to transition to pick your brain on kind of everything you've seen work from a human performance perspective over the last decade and kind of tie that in to my story just so that the listeners can kind of hear of some ideas and pathways that they can apply to their training. And so my current, training, I guess to back it up a little bit, like I went down a long endurance road for a few years where I got into marathons and ultra marathons. And then I got bored with that. So I went down a lot more of a strength training route. And recently, I'm definitely very focused and interested in the hybrid athlete journey because I think it is so cool to think about, like, how can I be great at strength and great at endurance? And being great at both of those allows you to be kind of always ready for anything that life can throw your way. And that's always been a Mountain Tough ethos and philosophy, and it's been incorporated into our training since the beginning, is this always ready mentality, to where we have you at an 80% level at all times with our Mountain Tough training. But if you need to dial in that last 20% for a specific mission or a specific Ironman or something like that outside of backcountry hunting, you're already going to be sitting at that 80% level. And so recently, outside of hunting and outside of being in the mountains, my wife and I have kind of dabbled in this High Rocks event. High Rocks is out of Europe. It started in Germany, and it's going kind of viral. So they're popping up all over the world. The one in London will have like 12,500 participants at it. And one of the reasons it's gaining so much popularity is that you can't be good at strength
Yeah.
and be successful, and you can't just be good at endurance and be successful. You have to be really good at both to be successful at these events. And you end up with about 5 miles of running, separated out across 8 1K splits.
Okay.
So it's 8 1Ks. After all 8 1Ks is the strength event. So you're going to run, you ski 1,000 meters, you're going to run very heavy sled push, and then you're going to run very heavy sled pull. And then they have broad jump burpees, wall balls, sandbag lunges. But it's really cool because if you only focus on running, that sled is going to crush you the day of the event. If you only focus on the sled, those runs are going to crush you. And so kind of like looking for those more elite times in our age group has been a really fun journey. We're 41 and just kind of wanted to pick your brain on what you've seen in the lab that we could apply, that listeners could also apply to their own lives from a training and nutrition and supplement standpoint as well.
Yeah. So first of all, that's really cool background. I actually just did a full podcast yesterday on this topic,
Oh,
and
cool.
I wish I would have talked to you for that because I actually think you laid it out more coherently than I did yesterday in like an hour. I really mean that because look, here's the reality. There's this interference effect that happens with endurance and strength, right? So strength tends to augment endurance, meaning benefits it, it boosts it, where endurance training tends to be detrimental for muscle size and strength. However, here's the context. If that is mostly applicable to people who are at a low level of fitness, okay, what you talked about is saying, hey, we're going to go past that. We're going to get to this 80%. If you're at 80% and you can go from there, now you actually have the ability to push and pull a little bit of these details depending on what you want to do. That's exactly what we do with our fighters. It's exactly what we do with our multi sort of discipline athletes. We got to get you here. And now based on your opponent, maybe you need more speed. We're going to dial up speed in this fight. Or maybe based on our game plan, it's going to be more grappling based. So we need more muscular endurance, more isometric endurance. We know that, grip's going to be a challenge, whatever. We're going to dial that particular note up. But that doesn't mean we're going from zero. Because if you're going from zero, that's not the approach, right? It is there. So I actually really do love the fact that you just get to 80% of everything. And then you can go, hey, 6 weeks from now, we're going to hang up more on this one. Or this particular hunt's going to be this way. Or this particular operation is going to be this kind of terrain. We need to deal with more altitude this time. I did my first hunt last year at 7,500 feet. We were kind of base camp at 7,500. We were up to 9,500. I'd never done that before that high. Okay, great. I had to do some things differently in my preparation to get ready for that, where traditionally it's much lower.
Yeah.
All right, great. My next hunt's going to be in Maui next year. So all right, I don't need, I'm probably going to be dealing with more hot temperatures. So again, you can kind of pick not only the physical attributes, but what are the other things you need to focus on? Being able to be thermal regulation. Do I need to breath work regulation? Is it going to be weather? I got to be able to move with a lot of gear and not become what is the thing, right, that you need to be able to do there? But getting the 80% is the place. And then from there, you can differentiate and specify. I think that is perfect. That is exactly what I would do. Now, to answer your question more globally here, from there, it is really about removing what we call physiological constraints. And the way to think about that is your body will perform to the highest level that possibly can past its lowest constraint. So what that means is say you can squat 600 pounds with a back squat and your VO2 max is 15. You'll never get to express more than a couple of 100 pounds of strength in your legs when you're on the mountain because your cardiovascular system will hold you to that constraint, right? The opposite would be true. Okay, so what you need to do is figure out what is your biggest physiological constraint. We call these performance anchors. What's your biggest anchor? What's the biggest thing dragging you back? It's not necessarily about getting to the next level with your strength, and by this I don't mean physical strength. I mean the thing that you were the best at, whatever skill you have. It is about removing your biggest constraint. To go to the sporting example, right? Of if we're taking a look at one of our rowers getting ready for the Olympics or one of our wrestlers, we're looking at and saying, okay, you have this glaring weakness that all of your opponents exploit. We can't lose because of that. We have to remove that thing, and maybe that is your mental game. All right, and so we have this joke that that big old comprehensive system I told you about earlier, sometimes we get to the end of that and we're basically like, all right, you need a multivitamin and a therapist.
Yeah.
Like,
We're throwing all that out.
yeah, it's not throwing it out, but it's like, that's your
Yeah.
biggest goal. Like, you don't have problems here. This is all, you don't have an endurance problem. You actually are just panicking before the fight, whatever, right? Or it can be the opposite, right? There can be real things happening there. So making sure that you're really analyzing every aspect of your human performance. What's this mean? Let's take a look at your sleep. Maybe maybe the fact that your lack of strength is because you don't train enough. And you don't train enough because you get really sore when you train hard. But you're getting really sore because you're not recovering well. And the biggest problem you have with recovery is you have terrible sleep. You can do whatever you want with your training. You can buy a new program, you can do whatever, but you're stepping over $100 bill to pick up a penny.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that $100 bill that we're looking for? What is that performance anchor? Could be your sleep. It could be you legitimately have some sort of pathogen in your body. You have a fungal overgrowth, you have a bacteria, you have like something like that. Those are not as common, but they have happened many and many and many times that we've seen. And we're like, this is putting a ton of stress in your system, and it's non-specific stress. So you want to put stress in from the perspective of your training and your workout and whatever you're doing, but it's overfilling your stress bucket because your stress bucket is already pre-full because it's dealing with fighting off this infection.
Yeah.
That's been there for days, weeks, months, years, that you're not aware of. Okay, so if we can get that infection out of there, that same level of training now doesn't make your stress bucket overfill. You're not seeing these problems of overtraining or insufficient recovery because like now we didn't do anything to your physiology, but now you can handle the training. So you can train harder or you can train the same amount and get recovered way faster, whatever the case is. Is it something to do with your physiology? So one of the things that we have become absolutely untouchable, world class in, is high performance blood work. And so we can actually run just blood analysis and figure out a ton of what's happening at people, not from the perspective of disease. That's not what I look at. Right? I'm not looking at if your cholesterol levels are going to indicate you're going to have a heart attack 65 years from now. Like, it's great, but like not my interest. My interest is in high performance. We can tell an enormous amount of information about you and how your body is operating right now and how it is performing the way it is performing. And we do that compared against high performers. So I'm not comparing your reference ranges on your blood work to a sick population or a not sick yet population. It is what do you need to be at compared to the world's best. And that is insanely insightful because now we can gear your training, your supplementation, your nutrition based specifically on your physiology to perform at its best, not just to keep you away from long-term chronic disease, which is what everything else for the most part does. Without medicine, by the way, without testosterone therapies, without like things like that. That's not what we do. Like what we do is come in and say, hey, your physiology is behind here and here and here. This is the micronutrient you need. This is the thing that we need to get in from the whole food. This is whatever activity we need. And then that'll correct your physiology. And then we can just get out of the way. Because then your physiology will be not constrained anymore. And you'll be stunned how well you can perform with an unconstrained physiology. So the analogy I give here is, imagine you're driving a car down a hill and you want to go faster. Your initial instinct is to put your foot on the accelerator. Great, that makes me go faster. But if I look over and I see your left foot is also on the brake, you can hit the accelerator and you will go a little faster, but you also put a lot of wear and tear on the system.
Wearing it down.
Things start to break.
Yeah.
The better approach is for me to look over and go, let me just take your foot off the brake. By not braking yourself, you will go a lot faster and you'll do it with less breakdown. And then if we're going as fast as hell possible and your foot is totally off the brake and you go, give me faster still, I want more. Now we can talk about hitting accelerator. But the first step of just hitting the accelerator is a mistake because you end up not going that much faster and you end up breaking really soon. And so we are on the hunt in your blood to figure out what is that foot on the brake. Let me get that out of the way. Let me correct that. We're not covering up the symptom. I'm not medicating you out of pain or whatever, not drugging you to fall asleep. We're correcting the physiology permanently and then getting out of the way and then watching your ship just take off down the road.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world, at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNTOUGH to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. And what are some of the things you're going to find in the blood of athletes?
Oh, I mean, how many hours you got?
What are the top 3?
Let me give you a real simple one, okay? I use this often. It's really easy. Any number of markers on there will tell us, like, I can basically call out your hydration status, your daily energy, your absolute recovery. We can measure what's called your physiological resilience in your blood. So I can see how resilient your physiology is from basic blood panels. I can determine your overall allostatic load, your total stress load. I can determine, of course, your metabolic health. We can determine your endocrine system, your hormone health, your immune function, your digestive health. Like, all this can be done in blood work. So we can see a lot about who you are and what's happening. One example would be something like albumin. So albumin is an interesting protein. It's the protein in egg whites, actually. But it carries things throughout your system. It carries cortisol and stuff like that, transports it throughout your system. So albumin is interesting because it is what is called an acute phase reactant, which means it responds to acute challenges. It's also incredibly important from a long-term perspective, such that if you are dehydrated, all right, it will increase albumin because it's kind of measured on concentration.
Yeah.
But if you are inflamed, it does the opposite. And so if you're slightly inflamed and slightly dehydrated, one pushes it up, one pulls it down. You know what albumin does? It stays right in the middle. So you can get your labs done and your albumin would look like it's perfect. But because we've done this so much and we have other cross references, we can look and say, okay, it's not perfect. It looks good, but you're actually slightly dehydrated and slightly inflamed.
Man.
We can see that, right? We can look at other markers. We can look at things like your potassium sodium ratios. What's going on there? We can look at carbon dioxide concentrations. I can tell if you're overbreathing at night, if you have sleep apnea, or any other number of sleep disorders. We can see a lot of these things. Again, we can see, like another example, we had a client in Dallas, actually, area, who was struggling with recovery. Testosterone was low, didn't want to be on hormone therapy. We were actually identifying in basic blood, actually, for the most part, that there was a tree in his neighborhood that was causing him a very slight amount of non-allergic response. It's different. Like, you can't get an allergy test for things like this, but it was putting stress in the immune system. We had him avoid that tree. That number corrected, and then his testosterone took off.
No way.
Recovery, all that stuff. Yeah, 100%. Like, these are, like, we can see these. That's what I mean. Like, every one of his blood markers was within the normal range. So if he was just looking at it, or a medical doctor was looking at it, like nothing was abnormal and nothing was clinically wrong with them. But we were able to see and go, okay, nothing is a clinical official disease, but this is not optimal performance. And we see something is happening here. We can run environmental scans, like we can do all kinds of stuff. In his particular case, it was pretty easy. So, I mean, I can give you 100 examples of people that are going through things. They think they're just normal because they're 50 years old now, or because of, whatever's happening. And those are not acceptable answers from us.
Man.
We can
Yeah.
see a lot within your blood, even when it looks like it's not on the disease qualifications yet. There's still a ton, and we can differentiate, like, are you dehydrated today on the day of the blood draw, or is this actually a chronic thing? Like we can see all that difference in your blood. So
Yeah, I've
that's what we've built.
yeah, I was curious your thoughts because it's pretty common now to get marketing advertisements and pitches from blood draw organizations that want to draw your blood and then do a review of it and then start selling you a variety of products. Usually those products are the same between the different brands that I've seen, but
Yeah.
they want to sell you like a peptide
Yep.
and usually testosterone
Yep.
and then some sort of like DHEA1C type pill. But that's always like gave me an incredible amount of pause because like I don't want an entrepreneur running my blood. And I was curious what you're seeing with those things.
So look, I'm for all solutions, right? We have used peptides in certain scenarios. Our athletes can't, for the most part,
Hmm.
use them unless we're talking like insulin or something. But look, we have famous actors and celebrities and famous musicians, and like they deal with an injury and they're on tour or whatever, and it's like, hey, I have to play a show. Like, okay, great. Like, we're gonna use peptides to get them back faster. Like, no problem.
Hmm.
Um, what you do with your medicine and your medical health is your
Up
choice.
to you. Yeah.
But I mean, not how I'm not an MD. I've never given a single person uh, a hormone or a peptide of any kind. I don't have an interest in that. Again, I'm not against it at all. Not what, like, totally fine. It's up to you and your thing. My academic and coaching interests are different, though. It is to say, hey, look, if we can actually just get your body what it tells us it wants, then we don't have very often have a need for that. There's only one caveat there, which is typically things like if you have a clinical disorder, um, you have like a brain tumor, you have something like that, where like, hey, I don't have the physiology. Like adrenal fatigue is not a real one. Like
Hmm.
we have dealt with special forces folks plenty of times. We have dealt with a lot of very, very high stress entrepreneurs and stuff. And we have not met a case yet where we have to go to medicine like that to correct somebody's energy, to correct their libido, to
Yeah.
correct their desire, their muscle growth. Like I'm not perfect. I'm not a miracle worker. Like, of course.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, we've been pretty successful. And I'm saying that because we've had so many people come to us after they've tried TRT
Hmm.
because of things like that. It's a TRT mill. It's something like that, right? It's just like their friend got it or their doctor just like threw it over to them. And that's fine. But unless you have strong guidance there, you're running a real big risk. And we've had so many people who were like, oh, I felt great for 6 weeks or 6 months. And now I feel horrible.
Yeah.
And now they don't know what to do and they can't get great guidance and they're getting a 30-minute telehealth thing. And those kind of blood work companies you're referring to, they are not comparing you to high performers. They are
Yeah.
comparing you
It's to the
against the sick
general.
model, right? And so if you want to be compared against the sick population, like, great,
Hmm.
go
Yeah.
ahead. Like, you want to know if you have a clinical disease, we don't even look for it. So if you think you have a legitimate clinical disease or want to know your risk of it, don't come to us because we don't look. I don't know. We don't even measure those markers. So
Hmm.
there's a place for those people as well, because again, like, that's not what we do. We don't do it all, and we do not do disease. To be as clear on that one as we can. But if you're like, hey, like, I want to see what this looks like to perform at my best, then that's what we do. We actually, depending on when this airs, it might be publicly available. So April 1st, 2024, the
Dang.
company Vitality Blueprint officially launches, and this is high performance blood work. For things like this, it is the markers that are needed for performance. It is fully analyzed and interpreted, and a specific plan is provided to you based on your goals, your dates, all that stuff. It is provided for you, all within that same platform. So,
That's cool.
yeah, it's like we worked for a long time to make this thing not really, 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 really expensive, and to do it
Yeah,
at a level that everyone can do.
that's
And
cool.
just again, in a few weeks here, that becomes a reality for the whole world.
That's incredible, especially to benchmark off other high performers.
Yeah.
I am curious about what else you would see. No, I know that you'll see it a million different things, but are are you also seeing some repetitive patterns like this guy needs some magnesium, this
Oh,
guy
yeah.
needs some vitamin B, some pretty basic stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of stuff that you've heard before in the past are true. Many folks are low on vitamin D. That's a very, very common one. Now, we found it less common in probably the type of people who are listening to this show, because you're more likely to be outside. Where you compare that to like all of our executives and stuff, like you can
Yeah.
pretty much guarantee that their vitamin D is just non-existent. But even within these folks, vitamin D is often very low. That is a very common one. We see that. We see tons of markers of like slight immune suppression. So again, it's not to a level where you're like, hey, I'm getting sick all the time, but it's to a level where you're not recovering as fast as you possibly could because you're devoting resources to that.
Hmm.
Another one that is really, really common we see is, again, probably most common is energy. Like my energy is dipping throughout the day, or my performance and my recovery isn't what it used to be. I don't know why. I'm eating the same. I'm weighing my food. Like I'm really dialed and my recovery isn't there. And oftentimes something is happening in the blood that's telling us like something's going
Mm.
on. It's diverting resources to some other place that it didn't used to be. And so it's just taking those resources out. So those are really common ones. Um, Overall, like we will see a ton about nutrition. So
Yeah.
here's maybe a really good example of it. There are general principles around nutrition that are like general best practices. But then past that, it is really about high precision. And so it is like, hey, I ate pretty healthy. Okay, well, I don't know what that means. Like, but second of all, let's just say whatever we agreed upon to be a somewhat healthy diet is somewhat healthy, but it's not right for your physiology. And so that's another one we see a lot is like, it is a pretty good setup, but it's not
Yeah.
for your physiology,
Not for you.
your genetic background, your lifestyle demands, the area you live, the type of food you're able to have access to. It's not lining up well with your physiology. And so we need to make some changes.
Mm.
Maybe that perfect diet is great for your wife or your brother, but it's not going great for you. It's not going catastrophe, but it's not going great either. So we'll see that one
Interesting.
pretty commonly, where it's just like not mashing up with your physiology for the most part. Those are common ones. Um, Cognitive function, like we'll see a lot of markers of cognitive function where it's just like I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I feel like I'm in a little bit of a brain fog, stuff like that. And there's a number of markers that are there. None of these have a single marker,
Hmm.
right? That this is, I guess, another thing to be careful of here. If you're gonna, if you can't afford our stuff or want to do it on your own or whatever reason, want to go with another company, that's fine. But one thing to be cautious against is what you don't want to do is look at one marker and then try to move that marker. And the reason is just take a look at albumin, right? So
Yeah.
let's say it's low and you're like, okay, great, I want to raise it up. Bad idea, like
Mm.
real bad idea, because it's low
Yeah.
for a reason. Your sodium, same thing, potassium, magnesium levels, like if they are low or high, you don't necessarily want to go in and start moving those markers. We should be using that as a clue to go, all right, why is that system the way it is? The equivalent would be if you're out there in your truck and your front left tire is low. All right, feel the tire. That's what I would try. But then all of a sudden you come back next week, it's low again. Okay, then you throw the entire tire out and put a whole new tire on. And a month later, it's low again.
Yeah.
Like, what do you have to realize? Like, your alignment's off in your truck. Like, there's some undue stress in the system. So you don't necessarily want to just like go fix the thing. You want to have a little more strategy of like, well, why is that low? The example we gave of testosterone is a great one. If your testosterone is low, there is a reason why. You can go if you want, but did you really solve the problem? Probably not.
No.
Probably not. And so we're looking at other markers to figure out why is it low. That's what I care about, because then we're going to go solve that problem, and then we'll get out of the way and then watch testosterone just take off.
Mm-hmm.
And we just solved it. So,
Yeah.
like, it is true, many of the people are quote unquote low in testosterone, but like, it's the action step you take after that matters, right? Like, well, what did you do about it?
Yeah.
If you need medicine, that's entirely fine. Again, I hope I don't sound preachy or judgmental against that one. We're not. Plenty of our people in our program are on hormone therapies, male and female. But we're more interested in figuring out, again, that's a sign. That's a symptom
Get
of
to the
something
root
wrong.
cause. Yeah.
And unless you have some sort of anatomical issue there, most likely this is a symptom of some global event, and we're trying to solve that global event.
Crazy. And if I just go get my blood work done, like at the local hospital, they'll do decent blood work, but it's going to be comparison. The averages and medians are going to be the general public, not high performance athletes.
Yeah. So they're not even going to select. I mean, if you go to get blood work done at a hospital or through a doctor, they're going to be looking for acute infections, acute disease. Like, are you dying right now? Do you have cancer right now? Are you at a really high risk of diabetes? Do you have diabetes right now? Are you, extreme cardiovascular risk? Heart disease is still the number one killer, particularly in men. So they're going to look at markers of death, right? That's not even the right marker to look at. So it's not even comparing you to the right person. But step number one, we're not looking at that stuff.
Disease.
Like, we're going to see those things. A lot of them, like blood glucose, it's a huge part of human performance. But we're not looking at your ApoB and your markers of, like, are you going to have Parkinson's 60 years from now? So it's not even the right markers, number one. And then two, the comparison issue. And then three, it's the interpretation. Okay, why is it there? But the biggest one is even four, which is, okay, now what do I do about it? They can't, they won't, they're going to tell you, like, hey, have less stress, eat more, exercise. Like, they're going to tell you that, right? Like, okay, great. Like, you need precision, which is like, hey, you need green tea extract, and you need ashwagandha, and you need, like we're going to be able, we get real, like, take A, B, C, and D, and that marker is going to get corrected. And we've just done that so many thousands of times.
That's amazing.
We're pretty good at being like, this is exactly what to do. So it is pick the right marker, have been analyzed and interpreted appropriately, understand what that's telling us about what your body is doing, and then be able to tell us exactly what to do to solve the problem.
That's amazing. I love it.
That's why people have paid so much money over the years for that. But now we're able to build that into software to make that scalable.
Oh, I can't wait till that comes out. So I guess backing up to the scenario around 80% level hybrid athlete, you're going to get that lowest constraint up, which makes complete sense. And you do see that difficult on a lot of folks because a lot of individuals like to do things they're great at, not the things that they're not great at. But getting that lower denominator up, getting your blood work done, your nutrition dialed. What about supplementation? Are there simple supplements that you see change the game, like creatine, protein?
Yeah, sure. Whole food is always the best answer. So always the base of your pyramid, the foundation, it is 80% of the benefit will come from whole food. So I'll answer your question, but it is important, like 80, maybe more, is going to be whole food based.
Yeah.
We're called supplements for a reason, right? But let's go there. The ones that are generally effective, yes, I know we're over time here. I do have to run, but
you bet.
To give you quick answers here, yes, making sure your protein is at least sort of a gram of protein per pound of body weight, plus or minus. You don't have to be overly detailed there. Is great. And if you want to use protein supplements for that, protein powder, that's fine. If you want to get that all from whole food, that's fine too. It's you think about protein powder more of just like dried milk. It's fine. It's nothing special, but it's just like an easier way to get protein in.
Yeah.
Creatine has an enormous base of evidence, highly effective and high safe. It is effective for muscle strength and performance. There's actually also a couple of trials that have been done on mood. There's a very mild, it's mild, but there's a mild nootropic effect. So cognition, function, brain power. There's been studies on higher dosages looking at postmenopausal women and bone health. Minimal effect, like very minimal, but still a
Wow.
positive effect there. And almost none of these have ever shown any downside. And I can go on and on. There's lots of work on TBI, brain health,
Mm-hmm.
post-concussion, brain injury. There's lots of work on neurological disorders and diseases like Parkinson's and things like that. They're not all showing benefit, and then the benefit is not like, again, some
Off the
crazy
charts.
amount, but it is to show you how well-rounded that supplement truly is. So that's a great one. Vitamin D, as I mentioned earlier, is often quite low in many people. So that's also like very low effect. The toxicity level is outrageous. You can go really, really high with vitamin D. You don't need to, but you can go high and it doesn't really have that much of a downside.
Hmm.
So those are good ones. Magnesium for high performers, particularly those that are moving a lot, is another like really ubiquitously beneficial one for the most part. That's kind of like the next level down. If I were to stack them, like
Yeah.
creatine, kind of being our first level one. Fish oil is another really commonly effective one. Tons of benefits across multiple domains with low risk. And then like kind of below that second ring would be like things like magnesium, which are there. So those would be the ones that you can start with. That'll feel great. And then past that, it is making sure hydrated and fueled for high performers, if you can,
Mm-hmm.
would be there. But those would be probably the top ones.
Awesome. Well, I know you do have to run. I want to be respectful of your time, Andy, but thank you so much. I mean, that's incredible information, super valuable. I I'm stoked for you to launch your show. I saw you have your cover slide up for your podcast, and to get more episodes out like this to the public is going to be a game changer. What's the status on your show?
Yeah, so that's called Perform with Dr. Andy Galpin, and that will be coming out, again, depending on when the show is released, pretty soon. It'll be out this spring. And so
I
it is
keep,
going to be 10 or so episodes, season one, and then there'll be a little bit of a break. It's not a weekly show. There's no guests, interviews, and stuff like that. It is us spending time on individual topics for high performance. It's not just for sports. It is high performance in any area of life, and it is trying to give people the tools to do kind of what we call the three I's. So number one, how do I investigate? So, how do I measure, assess where I'm at with my physical strength or size or cardiovascular capacity or nutrition or blood work or whatever. So what do I measure? What are the technologies that are the best in the world, that are like pretty good? And then what are those that are like scalable, affordable, that everyone can use? Number two, how do I interpret all that? How do I know if I'm good, bad, great, terrible, best in the world, world record, things like that? And then number three, how do I intervene? So what do I do about it? What are the protocols? What are the supplement, nutrition, training things I can do to change, improve this one? So each episode is a little bit different theme, training and muscle and cardiovascular system and sleep and like other technologies and things like that. And so that again will be out. I can't say exactly when, but we got
spring.
almost done filming and it'll be out this spring of 2024.
Oh man, I'm stoked. I saw it. I saw that cover come up, and then I keep checking back to see when there's going to be an episode in there. It's going
Very
to be
soon.
awesome.
Very, very
Yeah.
soon.
Amazing, man. Well, we're sure proud of you. It's cool to hear your story. I hadn't heard that before, so to hear like your childhood journey and then taking that path less traveled. I mean, it's amazing what you're doing, and keep doing it. You're definitely, changing a lot of lives and helping a lot of people.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you for having me on, man. Like I like talking about this stuff, so I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. That episode got me fired up. There's a lot of human performance tips and tricks that Andy mentioned that you can apply to your life right now. I'm really stoked about his business launching Vitality Blueprint, high performance blood work. He broke that down in that episode. That is going to change the game for sure, because it is like fine tuning a Ferrari. And if you can find the supplement or the vitamin or anything that you have a deficiency in, if you can fix that, then you're not pumping the brakes as you're pumping the gas. So phenomenal advice there from Andy. I loved hear him talking about that, how you can benchmark your biomarkers with other top performers. certainly going to check that out. And then also, I was just really proud of him for taking that path less traveled. That was a big chunk of gold for me, because his business, his lab, the research he's doing right now at California State Fullerton would not exist if he didn't choose to take those risks, to do something a little bit different than what everyone else is doing. Phenomenal to see that in hindsight, and how that journey created who he is now and what he is doing now. He's truly transforming lives and getting very valuable information out to the world. Great conversation with Andy. I hope you loved it as much as I did. If you want to learn more about Andy, you can check him out on Instagram at Dr. Andy Galpin. And make sure you check out his podcast. He did say it's going to launch this spring. His podcast you can find in the podcast store of your choice, and it is Perform with Dr. Andy Galpin. Thanks so much. We are stoked that you are diving into these episodes week after week. We love you guys, and we will see you on next week's episode. Stay dangerous. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.